they really enjoy the turkeys ration. So what we do is in the evening times we pose the turkeys up, and then Nate will go ahead and he'll feed the turkeys on the inside of the hut, give them about 45 minutes to an hour, and then open the door and let them out for the rest of the day. Otherwise, these guys want to get in there and bum rush the grain. There's debatable info on that as far as not giving copper to sheep. So there might be a little bit of copper mineral intendedly in for the turkeys that you kind of want to keep the sheep away from. Whether it's a big problem or not, I don't know, but we try to keep them out. But you can see they really enjoy it. One nice thing about that, though, is if you do have to call an animal or get to it, actually this is the ration for the sheep, which didn't have any copper in it. But
how do the turkeys interact with the sheep?
Yeah, it's funny. We'll let them out today so you can see here. All right.
No, I want to see them. Look at me like this one.
So first thing in the morning, they'll want to go in and get their morning ration. They'll spend the rest of the day foraging through the paddock here. The paddock they're currently on is the roadway that we've had from the house up to the pig paddock. So it's a little bit kind of trumped down, but there's a lot of woods and more grass along the backside. And they both forage together. And what's kind of neat in the evenings when we go to put them up, we kind of funnel them back into the hut. And the sheep actually help. They'll put their horns down, they'll actually guide them towards the hut there. So while we're up top, we're raising Shetland sheep, and they're kind of an older Irish kind of highland, upper rolling hill, forested kind of area where they kind of thrive on the elevation, they thrive on being hardy, they're an old heritage breed. We initially got them just to be edible lawnmowers, and they've turned out to be a really nice addition because on how they behave with the turkeys. From day one, when we had the turkeys out on pasture, the sheep in the evenings would huddle up around them and form a circle around the turkeys, so being like super protective of the turkeys, which was kind of neat. So when we go to put them up, we knew exactly where they were because they were always right there with the sheep. Now in the evenings, when the boys go close the turkeys up, the sheep actually help. So the boys, if the turkeys fly up over the netting, and the boys pick them up, put them back inside the paddock where their evening hut is, the security hut. The sheep will actually, when we lay or put the turkey inside of the pasture, the rams will put their horns down and just very gently, they'll just start nosing them towards the front of the hut, which seems absolutely crazy, but it's pretty neat to see that. So they're neat because they're edible lawnmowers. They're improving our pasture. They're eating weeds and things that the chickens and turkeys don't. They're depositing their manure, which the chickens and turkeys love. So that's a second value add that the sheep have. So they're maintaining the pasture. They're providing subsistence for the chickens and turkeys. On top of that, they're a really high-end wool breed too. So they're really nice wool. If you want to card it, spin it to make clothing or textiles, they're awesome for that too. But they seem to have a really sturdy health and vigor to them, which has been nice. Most of everything that we have here, including the pigs and everything else, we try to go with breeds that don't need a whole lot of us. So the Shetland sheep are working out great up there inside the same pasture, inside the same paddock with the turkeys. They were also in there when we had the chickens as well. And I think it's also up with predators too, because there's 3 rams inside of there, and so you'd have to be probably a silly coon to want to get in there, especially with that appearing protective nature of those sheep. So we've enjoyed having them. So you get fiber, we're getting food. They're providing food for turkeys and chickens with their manure, and they're improving the pasture. So there's 5 things just with one animal that we got just to see how they work.
Do you think you'll see a day where you process them, or do you want to keep them alive for their impacts alive?
Yeah, they're rams. We did ban their testicles, but they're at the age now where if we're going, the sooner we process them, I would think the more tender the meat's going to be. So we have to make a decision: do we go ahead and process them for meat, or do we just keep using them as they are for pasture improvers? As you can see, we're under the workshop here. It's raining. The weather's changing. It's going to be getting cold. There's going to be less pasture available for them. So if we keep them through the winter, there's stuff for them to eat, but I'm going to may have to bring in some inputs to carry through the spring. So it's a matter of, what kind of value do I put on those sheep for the rest of this year as to what my goals are. And so right now, I'm kind of undecided. They've been so great with the other livestock. I kind of want to hang on to them, but they would be delicious too. So it's nice to have options.
What about the turkeys up there? What breed did you go with turkey, and how those work?
This year we went with bronze-breasted turkeys, so they're kind of more of a conventional bird, but they look nice, so not just a standard white broad-breasted. The reason being, in the past we've raised bourbon reds, and they're a delicious bird. They're a great bird, but the grow time is way, way longer. And the issues we're having with the bourbon reds is they would roost on top of the house and completely manure the roof. They're really, really curious. And so when we have these little guys when they're kittens running around here, the turkeys are pretty brutal to little baby kittens. The turkeys can also be a little bit brutal to any small chicken or anything else that's running around. They have a tendency of, hate to say it, but kind of want to peck the eyes out and kind of disable the animal. So their survival characteristic, it was excellent. We didn't do anything for them, but I didn't even feed them. They free range the entire property, and in the nights they would roost up 30 feet in these trees. I never lost a single one to predators, which is great. It's just their personality was more than I wanted to manage this year. So we were unsure how we were going to do that. I didn't want to do bourbons, and so we still had a time frame to go with a shorter grow bird. So right now the turkeys are 8, 9, 10, 11 weeks old. 11 weeks old, and they already weigh probably 12 pounds. So by Thanksgiving, they're going to be 20, 24-pound birds that are working way easier for me in this system and still create a delicious dinner. The only issues with the bourbon reds is, like any heritage breed bird, the drumsticks are kind of long. That meat can be a little bit stringy. All of the meat's darker, which I love, but if you're a person who likes a whiter, lighter meat, that entire bird tends to be more dark, kind of like a guinea fowl or something else would be. With these birds, I don't know. We're going to butcher them and see. We butcher everything here. Matter of fact, we'll get changed out, and this will end up being the butchering station for the turkeys. But it'll be interesting to butcher those as well and kind of see hand in hand the differences between a bourbon red and a bronze-breasted.
You got 19 up there. What's the plan, and how does it fit into your context for how many you keep and how many to sell?
So I only keep one, and the other 18 get sold. Right now there's still a few available, but with all the animals here, we only try to keep enough back to meet our family's needs, and then make the rest available to friends, family, public, like our customers and friends that come in and buy from us. Try to do it in a scale to where, and we're upfront about it, we raise enough animals to cover our cost for our family's meat needs.
So your meat turns out to be free.
Our meat turns into being free. We still have time invested in that as well. So we try to raise enough animals where our meat's free, but we're also have enough profit from the ones that we do sell, where it turns into enterprises for my kids, really. Like the pork, they get paydays. The boys, Nate and Jake, they're our farm managers. They take care of all of this, and so they would do this for free because they like to do it. But I think it's important to teach them the values of working hard for that dollar and setting up that early entrepreneur mind from the very beginning. The harder they work, the better the yield, the higher the return is. So we try to do it. We try to raise enough that cover our meats for free, and we have just enough profit in there to compensate for the time and that effort. And that right now it seems to work in our scale with 15 or less pigs, 20 or less turkeys, a couple hundred meat birds, occasional ducks, bees, and then the nursery stock is, we're talking about in the podcast before, having, 2 larger balls or 7 smaller balls. For me, it's funner to have more options and then see how they play out and what they look like and what the potential is, than just to put all my time and effort in just those 2 big ones as of right now. So it's fun to diversify, to have smaller eggs in the basket than to have just a couple large ones so far.
For the turkeys that you do sell, what are you able to sell them at on a farmstead level in terms of price per pound?
So because these are shorter grow, these are going to be $4 a pound. on those. Before they needed to be more towards $4.75, $5 to make up for it, and that wasn't quite compensating. I don't think enough for the time, except for the fact that that's not true, because they were bourbon reds. We had very little management in them, so even $4.75 is appropriate.
What are they finishing out at now? The ones you have? Probably.
I don't know. I'm thinking 20 to 25 pounds.
Okay.
So they're still going to be an $80 to $100 bird. Last year, they were still $80 to $100 birds, but there's a lot less carcass. So what you find is when you experiment and you try things, you'll find that like sometimes like the heritage breed bird, if you're not getting that extra money out of it and it's growing 3 times as long, if you end up with a $100 turkey that you have 6 months in, or you have a $100 turkey that you have 3 or 4 months in, or 3 months in, you start to look at the feed conversions, and when you run all the numbers, you're like, wow, it makes way more sense to run the shorter grow bird at that price, unless I can get the extra money out of this one. And like we were talking about when we had the blind taste test on chickens, folks all agreed the longer grow bird tasted better, but it didn't seem like it was worth the extra $2 a pound to do it. So it's like a tricky with all these things, and being a matter of scale, it's tricky to find what you like to do, what makes sense to keep doing, and kind of pair them where it all works together.
One thing that's came up a lot today, and I think it's admirable, I think a lot of people could benefit from it, is you aren't afraid to try stuff, not knowing it all going in, see what works, and then either scrap it, try something new, or adapt it and move on.
Yeah.
How do you really take that approach? Because sometimes people try stuff, it doesn't work, they fail, and they just think, well, I failed, I'm done with this.
Well, I think the first thing is if you're not finding joy and happiness in what you're doing, what's the point? So we try to do things we're interested in that is fun to do, and then when those things get to a point where it's not fun to do, there is no joy and happiness. It becomes a labor or a chore to do. That's when we start looking at cutting that thing completely out, or switching it up to where we can get those attributes that we're looking for out of those things. I think a lot of that has to do with just not being afraid to fail. There's lots of things, we could spend days here on all the things that seemingly failed or didn't go as planned, that was a stepping stone or led to something else that did. So I think for me and for my wife and our family, when we do these things, we're looking at it as a learning experience first and foremost that leads to a quality of life. And then if that system can get tailored or adapted to turn into something that is more profitable or is funner, then that's what we're going to keep doing. But the big thing is not to be afraid to fail, just to go ahead and try things, but also to not be silly with it. There's no way in the world it would be correct for me to get on fire with pastured poultry and bring in 1,000 chickens here. That would be silly. The infrastructure and the time would lead to me probably never wanting to do chickens again. The same thing with if I quadruple the amount of pigs or quadruple the amount of cows, like right now, it robs the joy of enjoying that experience and learning at an acceptable risk. And I think in our scale, at our very super small farmstead scale, we're finding how things kind of work together, and that's the trick, I think.
When it comes to homesteading, why homesteading?
When we first were living in town, living that suburban life, we were starting to slowly have a draw to live life in a way to where we were taking more responsibility for the actions that we took, for the food that we ate, how we raised our family. We're taking our life into our own hands. And so we made a few steps to kind of do that, the backyard garden and thinking about homeschooling and things like that. It really wasn't until I got in an accident and almost lost my life where everything got super real, super quick. And at that point in time, we made that decision to be way more conscientious, be way more responsible with all the actions that we took, with what we did with our family, the time we spent. We got way more accountable with those things. One of the things that we wanted as a family was the homestead life. Live on a piece of land, try to raise food for ourselves, and live a much more healthier, happier life than the life we had of living the rat race, the American scheme in town. And so it's been a progression ever since, and a discovery constantly of what that means to us now. But I think Susan and I's biggest takeaway is if we're not living a life that's of joy and happiness without us trying to do things that bring in joy and happiness, if we can do the things that bring those two together, that makes all of it worthwhile.